Let us move on to question number 9, Module 1, Reading and Writing section of Practice Test 5. More than 60% of journeys in Mexico City occur via public transit, but simply reproducing a feature of the city's transit system, example its low fares, is unlikely to induce a significant increase in another city's transit ridership. As Erick Guerra et al. Have shown, transportation mode choice in urban areas of Mexico is the product of a complex mix of factors, including population density, the spatial distribution of jobs, and demographic characteristics of individuals. System features do affect ridership, of course, but there is an irreducibly contextual dimension of transportation mode choice. So, which choice best describes the function of the underlined portion in the text as a whole? So, we need to focus on this. So, is it A? It presents an objection to the argument of Guerra et al. About transportation mode choice in urban areas of Mexico. B. It explains why it is challenging to influence transit ridership solely by altering characteristics of a transit system. C. It illustrates the claim that a characteristic associated with high transit ridership in Mexico City is not associated with high transit ridership elsewhere. D. It substantiates the assertion that population density, the spatial distribution of jobs, and demographic characteristics are important factors in transportation mode choice. So, if we observe over here, initially we can see that they are talking about more than 60% of journeys in Mexico City occur via public transit, and they are trying to see if the same thing can be reproduced in another city. So they are saying it's low fares. So apparently it has low fares over there. So it is used by 60% of journeys. 60% of the people or 60% of the journeys are done with this public transportation. But Erick Guerra et al. Has shown that transportation mode choice, so the choice in urban areas is a mixture of a lot of factors. It is not just because it is low, it has low fares. So it will be dealing with population density, the spatial distribution of jobs, and demographic characteristics of individuals. So all this also have to be taken into consideration, not just low fares. So system features do affect ridership, of course, but there is an irreducibly contextual dimension of transportation mode choice. So we have to only tell what is the function of this underlined part in the whole text. So which do you think it is? So if you said B, well done, that is the correct answer. It is the best answer because it most accurately describes how the underlined portion functions in the text as a whole. The first sentence explains that reproducing the high ridership of Mexico's public transit system in other cities by implementing some of its features, such as low fares, is unlikely to guarantee significant ridership increases in those cities. So just by making low fares, it is maybe not possible to achieve the same thing in other cities. Then the following sentence after that introduces a study by Guerra et al., whose findings, namely that choice of transportation mode in urban areas in Mexico is influenced by a variety of local contextual factors, which support this claim. So the first part of the last sentence concedes that features of transportation systems likely do have some effect on ridership numbers, but the underlined portion reiterates the study's conclusion by stating that there is an irreducibly contextual dimension to people's choice to use public transportation. That is, in other words, there is a complex mix of local contextual factors, including population density, spatial distribution of jobs, and demographics, whose influence over an urban center's transit ridership is unique to each location, and it is unlikely that simple changes to transit systems characteristics could negate of those contextual factors. Thus, the underlined portion explains why it is challenging to influence transit ridership solely by changing some of the transit system's characteristics. So basically, this sentence is explaining why it is challenging to influence transit ridership solely by altering characteristics of a transit system. And A is incorrect. A says it presents an objection. Rather than objecting to the argument of Guerra et al., the underlined portion in fact reiterates their argument. So the word objection itself means this is a wrong answer, because it's reiterating their argument actually by stating that there is an irreducibly contextual dimension involved in transportation mode choice. In other words, transportation mode choice in urban areas of Mexico is strongly dependent on contextual factors that are unique to each urban area. Choice C, which says it illustrates the claim that a characteristic associated with high transit ridership in Mexico City is not associated with high transit ridership elsewhere. So this is incorrect because it mischaracterizes the text central claim, which is that transit ridership is the product of a complex mix of contextual factors and transit system features, not that a characteristic associated with Mexico's city's high transit ridership was found to have no association with high transit ridership elsewhere. And additionally, the underlined portion does not illustrate a claim, but instead restates the findings of Guerra et al. So it's not illustrating any claim, it is just reiterating whatever Guerra et al. Has said. And D is not correct. Although Guerra et al. Demonstrated that population density, the spatial distribution of jobs, and demographic characteristics, factors that comprise the contextual dimension of transportation mode choice, influence transit ridership, the underlined portion does not substantiate. It is not this part which is underlined, that is not substantiating. That is, it is not providing any evidence in support or any kind of whatever, no evidence is given. Rather, the underlined portion is merely restating a study finding that explains why simply altering a transit system features would unlikely induce significant increase in transit ridership. So that's about it. So B is the best answer in this case. It just explains why it is challenging to influence transit ridership solely by altering characteristics of